First of all, I'm writing about this experience partially to share with others my experiences on this drug, but also partially for my own sake, to try and get a handle on what occurred and integrate into a cohesive experience, which I have so far been unable to do. It's an experience that is very difficult to get one's mind around, and that is half the reason I am writing this post. My buddy tried some of the 5x extract a few days ago and said it was really interesting. He described how he imagined he was standing up, but was in fact lying down the entire time. He described seeing his friends around him, except they were composed of thousands of tiny versions of themselves, as if you had stacked 1,000 Lego men together to make one giant Lego man. While he was in this state, he described how he was still pretty aware of things around him. We decided to give the 7x extract a try. I went first, and contrary to the directions on the package, we loaded about 1/3 of a gram into the bowl of a large bong. My state of mind could be best described as apprehensive, as I was excited to try this new thing, but at the same time, slightly frightened, as I had never experimented with hallucinogens before. I hadn't even tried mushrooms. I burned the bowl and cleared the bong in one single, huge hit. The smoke was smooth and flavorful, less harsh than marijuana smoke. I held it in, and after about 15 seconds, I began to feel the effects. I started to feel it in my head first, as a slight dizzy feeling. Then within seconds, it had spread to my entire body, and I felt my muscles become very heavy. I guess there was a little left in the bong because I remember my friends urging me to finish off the last puff, and I complied. I was on a couch with the bong on the floor, and as I tried to move forward, it was like I virtually had to force my body to move, as if its natural state of rest was in the sitting position. Everything was in slow motion. As I leaned forward, the edges of the objects all around me suddenly became checkered or pixelated, and I felt myself taken hold of by an irresistible force which pulled my whole body to the floor, and then through the floor out of the universe. It is very difficult for me to describe, but somehow I knew that my mind was no longer in the reality that I had previously existed in. I had fallen out of our world into some place that I can only describe as completely different. My physical body seemed gone, but I felt as though I needed more space to move in. My friends told me later I was on the floor slowly pushing objects out of my way, trying to stretch out. What I actually saw there I remember little of, but what I do remember was dark and frightening, like something out of Pink Floyd's The Wall. It was not at all what I had expected, and a part of me desperately wanted out, but at the same time, another part wanted to sink further into this new world. Wherever I was, I knew that my mind was really there, and at the time, it seemed inconceivable that it was just a hallucination. I could hear my friends' voices from far away asking if I needed help, and I wanted them to be quiet so I could focus more on figuring out where I had traveled to. I traveled back to a very special place from my childhood, and then, just as suddenly as I had fallen out of our reality, I was pulled upwards back into it. My eyes opened and I was back. I say back because I was filled with a definite and certain feeling that my mind had left my body and traveled somewhere else. Whether deeper into my own consciousness or outwards into another dimension, I cannot say, but it had left and then returned. I picked myself up off of the floor back onto the couch, which took extreme effort because I could still feel the force pulling me down, as if I weighed hundreds of pounds. It took about 15 minutes before I was ready to talk about what I had seen with my friends. They proceeded to do it. One friend stood up and strolled around outside and described how the world was a lot of fractured pieces coming together to make one big piece, and the other friend just got really giggly and described how he was full of energy. The next night we did it again, except with 10x extract and using about 1/5 of a gram each. Again, my friends were able to stand up and walk around in the house and speak with us, responding coherently to simple questions. One of them said he went to a place with a green field and a fence, but that was as far as the traveling went. I put on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album, partially to put me in the mood, and partially to act as an anchor to give me a link back to my real world. When I tried it the second time, it was exactly as before. I saw the checkered and pixelated objects, and then sank irresistibly into another reality. This time, I remember going first to some place that saddened me greatly, confirmed by my friends watching me cry on the floor, and then to another place, this one filling me with a great sense of joy. The second place was like a town from the Wild West, with the ghostly saloons and abandoned hotels standing tall along an empty dirt street. I was on the ground, resting in the shade of a giant wagon wheel, in the center of the street looking down it, out of the town and into the vast, endless desert. I fell deeper in the experience, and had no sense whatsoever of the room and the people around me. The music had gone silent. Then again, suddenly, The buildings, which had seemed life-size, revealed themselves to be only shadows on the side of my friend's bed standing only 8 inches from the floor. I saw a shoe attached to the leg of a man who seemed to be miles tall, and another man standing above me. I heard the music ebbing back into my mind, and I slowly realized that I was looking at my friends. I awoke laughing, filled with a sense of joy and a feeling that wherever I had been was fundamentally good, and I was overwhelmed with a desire to return. So I did. My friends this time, interested that they got up and walked around while I curled up into a ball on the floor in oblivion, urged me to try and describe my experience as I went through it. I told them that this would be impossible because my physical body and the physical world had vanished, but I would try. Even before I had returned to my baseline state, I took another hit of the same size and I left our world for the 3rd time. I had been right, speaking was impossible. This time, I was struck with a distinct impression as I left our dimension for the other, that the one we inhabit on a daily basis could be no less real than the one I traveled to with the help of the plant. It suddenly seemed shallow and immature. I felt myself turning to the right, and everywhere in the room that light met shadow, so too did the real reality meet the dream reality. I finally turned completely into shadow and was gone. I found myself in a turn-of-the-century town, with Victorian-style buildings and trappings about town. The buildings were all painted blue. I realized that I was a citizen of this town, and came to the realization that I could feel great amounts of time passing, a span of many years in just seconds. Because I had no physical body, I did not age, and the town remained ageless, but I knew that many years had passed, maybe 20, or even 60. Inside, I felt older, similar to returning to a high school after graduation and knowing without a doubt that you were young then, and are undeniably older now. I felt as if I had lived a life there, perhaps my own, or perhaps someone else's, I cannot say. Suddenly, I felt myself become angry. I was angry because I remembered that my friends had wanted me to describe what I was feeling, as if this were some fucked up robo trip and the bushes felt cool, man. I felt indignant inside because they were treating the life I felt I had lived as something trivial that one experiences on a lower level drug like weed, when I knew that this was someone's life that they were talking about. I was very angry. I remember screaming, "You can't fucking understand!" And then it felt like in my anger I physically ripped myself from my dream dimension. I came down very quickly, still feeling angry and insulted. My friend implied in a way that seemed to me to be patronizing, that I control the experience and talk about it while it's happening, and I knew that I could not. It was not under my control at all what was happening, and I could neither stop it nor describe it. Impossible to bridge the 2 dimensions in such a way, at least not yet. I went immediately to bed, angry because I felt that he had not understood what I had gone through. I feel like I have discovered a side of existence I never knew was there, completely separate from the reality we live in day to day, and yet, just as real. I still have the desire to go back and explore this new dimension further, and I want to stay longer, to tell the truth. While I was there the 3rd time, I felt as if it did not matter whether I stayed in dream world or returned, because each was equally real, or perhaps each was equally not real. I will probably try stronger doses until I reach a time when I can stay until I feel ready to leave, not when I simply depart against my will. I am still confused by how my friends seem to be able to interact with the physical world when on their trips, while I cannot, despite us doing the same dosage in the same environment. They can speak, play with objects, walk around fairly well, while I leave entirely for a place that is contained entirely within my own mind, and the physical world becomes inconsequential and non-existent. I have always known that I have a very active imagination. Perhaps this has something to do with it. I tried the intriguing substance for my 3rd time last night. My first 2 experiences with smoking the divine mint among friends came up short. I experienced only mild anxiety. I was at a loss for a calming CD to put in, so I turned on the local classical station. I packed a full bowl in my makeshift water bong, chili salsa bottle. I tried to relax and free my mind, but I was very anxious. My parents were just leaving for the night, so I went downstairs and poured a glass of lemonade and returned to my room. A good song on the radio now. I set up my pillows and cracked my window. Spring, nice breeze. All was dark except the lights from my system. I got onto my bed with my bong and started to toke. After about 3 rips, I began to feel pressure all over my body. I finished the bowl and closed my eyes. Mistake number 1, no sitter, and mistake number 2, too anxious. I started to almost dream, and I experienced a type of imagery, not like a vision, but an idea that I would imagine seeing. I was in a large pipe, like a sewer pipe, only bigger, and running vertically instead of horizontally. I was on a platform jutting out of the side. This is what I thought to be my jumping off point. I saw 2 entities flying in a circle above me, and I could hear them speaking. They discussed their need to get me to the higher level. I had an understanding that the higher I went in the tube, the better things were, but if I fell, I would be in trouble. I could hear them yelling to each other that I was too heavy and that they were going to have to drop me. Their voices seemed panicked, so likewise, I began to worry. I did not want to fall down the pipe. Sure enough though, they dropped me. In my mind, I linked this vision to the amount of trip I was having. I figured that those 2 people wanted to give me full-fledged vision, but I was not high enough or too heavy. In a panicked state, I ran across my room and fell into my desk, a very painful thing. I opened many drawers before I was able to remember where my salvia was. I knew I needed another bowl to help them bring me to the top. I was overwhelmingly aware that I was in the bottom of this pipe, and if I didn't get out soon, something terrible was going to happen. I started to pack the bowl, but then got extremely scared of going further into the Ska Maria's touch. I wanted it to end, there and then. Unfortunately for me, that wasn't possible. All at once, everything on me began to irritate my skin. I ripped off my clothes down to my boxers and took off my rings and hemp necklace. I needed someone, anyone, to calm me down. I began to hear more voices from the park behind my house, giggling and yelling. So without thinking, I ran out there. Still in my boxers, I found nothing but darkness. I was terrified, so I ran through the woods to my best friend's house, about a mile away. I knew his parents were gone, so I ran in and found him in his room. There he put a fan on me. I was sweating rivers, and in about 10 minutes I calmed down. Salvia was the most terrifying experience I have ever been a part of. At the same time, it is something I look forward to conquering over time. It is hard for me to explain what happened or the fear I was feeling. The outside sky was shifting colors, and I was still mentally awake, for the most part. When people ask me about my experience, all I can say is, I went absolutely insane. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already if you're enjoying this content, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any new upload. Thank you all so much, and let's move on to the next story. It was a Monday, and I'd missed work that day after losing my grandmother that past Saturday. My brother had also died in a violent car accident the week before, so you could say I had a lot of shit going on at the time. I decided to make good use of my day off with my beautiful and supportive girlfriend by doing some LSD. We had just recently dropped acid not too long before this, so the intention was for the trip to be a tad bit lighter. We wanted to have a good time but still be able to function, so we took the same dose that we had taken the previous week, 1 tab apiece, about 100 micrograms. There's this awesome creek through the woods in front of my house, so we rolled 2 decent-sized blunts and dropped our tabs in. We had walked the path many times and began smoking the first blunt as we made our way toward the creek. It was about a 20-minute walk, maybe 25. We carried a bottle of water and my pocket knife with me in case we had to cut briars or something. We got out to our favorite little spot by the water, but we had to climb over the train tracks, which proved to be quite difficult. We hung out there and smoked our other blunt as we enjoyed our acid come up. After vibing to some music for about an hour or so, we made our way back through the woods and up the hill to my house. I had more energy than usual, so I made my way up top pretty quick, and we walked up the little path to my house. I looked at my phone for the first time since dropping. I'm about 2 hours into my acid trip at this point, and my dad texts me that there is a package for me in the mailbox. My salvia came! I was psyched to try salvia for the first time after ordering some 20 times extract from a trusted vendor. It came so fast. I called a friend of mine up who had similar experience with psychedelics and told him I had some shit for him to see. I normally see this guy and smoke bud with him every day, but today, I had a surprise for his ass. We walked to the camper in my backyard. I had previously smoked DMT once before in this camper with my brother, whom I spoke of that is now deceased. Maybe I'll write a report about that. I told him, look bro, I'm not gonna make you do anything you don't want to, but I'm going to smoke this salvia, and I want you and my girl to watch me and make sure I don't do anything stupid. Now to be truthful, I was stupid. I had done minimal research and this shit was $20. I had tried up to this point LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, weed, Amanita muscaria, and DMT once. I had heard some pretty crazy DMT stories, but my experience with that had paled in comparison to my first salvia trip. I was not prepared for what this stuff was about to do to me. I took a few deep breaths to calm my mind. I was already on LSD and pretty high from the weed, but I considered myself a professional idiot and proceeded to hit the bowl like a champ. I remember pulling the smoke into my lungs deeply and exhaling a yellowish colored smoke that reminded me faintly of some mid-grade weed I had. Now here's where my memory goes blank. The next thing I recall is being thrown into this loop where it was kind of like a book. It was like pages in a book kept turning faster and faster and faster. I had no body, no sense of who I was. I was just spinning out through different realities at breakneck speed. I remember it happening all so fast and it felt like forever. I was trapped in this endless loop, tearing through different realities like pages in a book over and over and over. I had no idea that I had just smoked a substance that was doing this to my mind. I had no idea that my girlfriend and friend were still in the room observing me. I didn't notice my girlfriend sit down next to me and start rubbing my back. The first thing I heard that pulled me back into reality was my girlfriend screaming, "He almost lit my hair on fire!" It was true. In my absent-mindedness of being torn through realities that I'm still not sure were entirely hallucinations, I didn't realize that I still had the lighter in my hand. I'd thought that the small hole in the knee of my pants was a vortex to another reality. I looked at it horrified that it was going to tear away and pull me into another loop. I didn't know what was real and what was fake. I fumbled with the lighter in my hand until I flicked it and set my girlfriend's beautiful hair on fire. It was at that point that I finally came to and realized who was in the room with me and what I had just done. I screamed, "Get it away from me! I don't ever want to see it again!" and began wiping sweat from my face and shaking violently. I was amazed that such a small amount of this substance could blow me out of my fucking mind. I couldn't even stand up. I sat down on the floor and continued shaking for the next 20 minutes, vividly describing this horrible experience to them. My friend had pretty much said, "Yeah, just stay away from that shit." We rolled another blunt just to try and calm down from the experience, but it took me a good 30 minutes to stop shaking like a small puppy. It was honestly the scariest fucking experience of my life. Pure insanity crammed into 3 minutes that is doomed to feel like eternity. I really can't imagine how anyone can have fun with this shit, but to each their own, I guess. Personally, I don't think I'll be having many more experiences with salvia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first experience I've had where I really lost control. This trip changed my perspective on what a trip could do to me. Before this, I was quite confident I could handle anything salvia threw at me. If it got too intense, I knew I could just close my eyes and wait it out. Well, it's not that easy when you're blasted into another world. I'll start with the report I wrote almost immediately after coming back onto this world. I was still quite fucked up. When I closed my eyes, I still had decent visuals, but my only instinct was to write what I could comprehend happening to me. The experience, as I see it from a completely sober state, will follow. Well, I saw myself smoking, then saw myself from inside a TV. It's like a dirty me was taking hits, and everything went gray. I was dancing and singing while watching the reflection, taking hits. Anyhow, then the song got happy, so I figured it was a chance to fix things, so I got up and tried to leave, being stopped by different objects on my floor. It was as if I was in a special realm and they wanted in. After a while, I let them in. This tripped me out huge, so as I stood up, gravity changed, things got their color back, and I fell back into my realm, the floor. On the way, I cut my hand up and spilt the dirty water in my bong. This tripped me out huge, so I stood up completely and got my other lighter. After blazing more, I felt like I was a child. I got up to confront my parents who were the video game and lighter on my bed. After tripping and conversing for a while, I got up and did this. Salvia is fucked. And every action is called something new. Close window, Dream Hathaway. I think it comes from the noise the action makes. Well, that's what my still skewed mind thought of the experience. Now I'll elaborate and take it from a sober view. Oh, and just to let you know, it's a lot more entertaining and intense than that mini report describes, so don't let it discourage you from continuing to listen. So I took a seat on my bed, my standard Salvia spot, and loaded the bong with a nice fat bowl of weed crumbs and hit it. After smoking Salvia so much the past week, weed smoke seems like air to me, so I can take really huge hits. I managed to clear the entire bowl in one toke, and it got me pretty stoned. After this, I threw on the Requiem for a Dream soundtrack, something I've always figured would be trippy, but never tripped to it before. After sitting for about 5 minutes enjoying the tunes, waiting for the weed to really sink in, I loaded up my water bong with the first hit of Salvia. I thought it would be wise to sit on my floor to smoke it this time, because I was afraid ashes would fall from the bong and burn my bed. This ended up being a pretty bad idea. So I sat down cross-legged on my floor, waited for the song that was on to pick up a bit, and took my first huge hit. I got a bit uneasy due to the size of my hit. The smoke in my water bong was so thick it was a dark yellow-brown color. Somehow I managed to clear the chamber twice before holding it in for a good 30 seconds. Definitely the biggest Salvia hit I've ever taken. I thought about preparing the second hit while holding the first, but I just couldn't. I had to focus all my energy on holding it. It's definitely not as easy as holding weed. I have mad respect for anyone who could hold their Salvia and pack the next bowl at the same time. You guys are champs. Anyhow, let me note that I exhale the smoke into a towel because that comes into play later. The reason I do this is to reduce the amount of smoke in my room because the smell needs to be gone before anything goes in there. So, after exhaling the first hit, the Salvia hit me pretty hard. As I packed the next bowl, I could feel this weird sensation on my forearms, which at first I thought were spiders crawling all over them. I fucking hate spiders. Anyways, I quickly looked at them in panic. No spiders. I came to the conclusion that there were many long hairs protruding from my carpet and rubbing against my arms, but now I believe I was just incorporating the carpet with the sensation because my forearms were close to it, but I can't know for sure. I started acting very strange, but I convinced myself that I was just joking around. I would start to dance strangely to the music as I packed the next bowl and started singing, actually more like rapping I guess, in some strange language. Finally, I managed to pack the second bowl and realized I wanted to see what I looked like smoking, so I looked at myself through the reflection on my TV as I took the hit. This was one of those situations where I got so fucked up that it just seems normal and I don't even really think about it. I took a second huge hit and blew it into the towel. I then looked back at the TV and started dancing again while watching my reflection. I found this absolutely hilarious. You'd understand why if you saw how I dance. It's pretty damn funny. Then I noticed how insane I looked. I noticed how messy my hair was and saw that I had a crazy look in my eye. Yet I seemed to have a look in my face that made me think my reflection was rather insane, yet intelligent at the same time. This is when I forgot what a reflection was. Suddenly the person in the TV wasn't me anymore. It was some crazy kid in his room, in another dimension. I could tell he was rather evil, and I saw him start to load another hit of Salvia. Then I noticed I was doing the same thing, which shocked me. I began to think the strange kid was putting me into a trance and making me subconsciously do what he was doing. Maybe if this realization had affected my expression, then I would have realized what I was looking at was simply a reflection of me. But no. The reflection had the same crazed smile on his face as he loaded up the Salvia, sparked up the lighter, and took a third hit. Then I realized how gray this person's room was, which was due to the fact that my TV screen is gray, making the reflection appear that way as well. As I held in the smoke from the third hit, I noticed that the strange man in the TV had gotten in trouble by his parents. I couldn't see them, but I knew that they were right there on the other side of the door of the room he was in. Then I realized how similar his room was to mine, so I quickly looked away from the TV to further analyze the situation. So far, everything in my world had turned gray. At the same time, the music on the CD became rather negative, which struck me with some panic. Then all of a sudden, I realized I was still holding in the smoke from the last hit and quickly coughed it out. And then I realized I hadn't blown it into my towel and thought, oh shit. I had transformed into the same person on the TV. I was now in his room, in his dimension. With this new information, I realized that his parents were on the other side of the door, listening to the mayhem going on inside. With this, along with the fact that I just exhaled a huge amount of smoke into my room, I knew that he was busted. For some reason, I started laughing hysterically. I'm not sure why, but I just couldn't help it. I found myself gasping for air because I was laughing so hard. It was time to go confront my parents. I was still sitting on my floor at this point, so I made an attempt to stand up. As I got to about crouching level, I noticed a banana right in front of me. Actually, I'm not exactly sure if it was a banana. The only thing I can remember for sure was that it was yellow and had 2 cartoony eyes. Then I realized that I could see color again and that I had left the gray dimension. This intense change terrified me, as I had forgotten what color was. I tried to stand up as quickly as I could, but the floor from under me quickly slanted into a steep slope, and what was once my wall became the floor. I decided I should just give in to this force and fall backwards, not having a second thought about it. Well, even before hitting the ground, I realized my mistake. Although I wasn't exactly sure what was wrong about it, I heard a loud crashing sound. For a second, I didn't know what it was, until I realized it was me. I could swear I slid down this slope which was once by my floor, but there's no way that's possible, so I can't really explain it. All I know is that for a split second I returned to the gray dimension, and I was the messy-haired crazy kid again. But then I snapped out of it and thought to myself, fuck, wait a minute, I smoked a shitload of salvia, I must be tripping. So as quickly as it initially hit, things went back to semi-normal. Nothing like complete sobriety, but normal compared to how I was seconds before. Then I realized I fell exactly where my bong was, and noticed a huge puddle of smelly water sinking into my carpet. I tried to clean it up with a towel, but it didn't exactly work too well. I then looked at my hand and noticed I had cut it open. I think it hit my TV cabinet if I'm not mistaken. Suddenly, I said in the most dumbfounded voice ever, "Oh, so that's why you need a sitter," while staring blankly at my bleeding hand. Wow, I wish I had caught that on tape. It must have been a funny sight. I pulled my old typical move and thought, more drugs. So I loaded up my now waterless water bong with another hit of salvia. This is where things get extremely hazy, as if it weren't that way already. What I can remember is I kept thinking I was smoking weed and then going, oh yeah, it's salvia. As I was exhaling into a towel, I noticed it was wet. At the time, I thought I had recently used it to dry myself off after a shower, which grossed me out a bit. It wasn't until I sobered up that the water was in fact from the spilt water from the bong, so I had my face stuck right in it. Gross. After smoking quite a few hits, I'm not sure how many, I actually managed to get up and lie on my bed and sort of enjoy my trip. I believe at this point I had a mental conversation with the lighter and video game case that were on my bed. Well, that's it. My room smells horrible now, so I'm not sure how many times I forgot to use the towel, and the bong water all over my floor probably isn't helping the stench. Also, the language I was speaking for most of the trip was quite fascinating, although the only 2 words I managed to save were Dream Hathaway, which meant close window or clean up or something to that extent. One more thing I'd like to add is that while watching the crazy guy on my TV, let me remind you it was in fact my reflection. There were many other things that happened, I just forgot most of it, which is a damn shame. Next time I will definitely have something to talk into to record the experience somehow so I can remember better. Either way, when I was told to have a trip sitter when using salvia, I ignored it, at least with the regular salvia I've been smoking, not extract. Remember, this shit can have a reverse tolerance, so just because it's cool the first few times, doesn't mean it will always be that easy to control. I have a few experiences worth of salvia left, and I will probably save it until I am blessed with some other psychedelic drugs. Why? Because I'm an idiot, and I want to take it to the next level, even though this one kicked my ass. One thing I can promise is I will definitely have a sitter next time I do salvia, and I highly recommend you do the same. I'm pretty damn scared to try the extract now if this is what the regular plant can do. Good luck to everyone with your experiences. Thanks for listening, and be careful.